You were curious about...
Oh, that you mean. Yeah, you said there was a bit of a contradiction in my logic.
Yes.
As we talked about IP rights the last time, and I was a bit surprised to hear that, because I found that we rounded the subject up pretty nicely from both of our perspectives, I would say. And I'm curious to learn what exactly you found to be contradictory.
Specifically, the blurry line denoting what is infringement.
Yes.
The problem is what you require is a hard, clear line, because you're going to consider things on one side of the line to be rights violations and the other side to be not. And my contention is that there is no possibility of such a line, because there's no point at which it's justified to stop someone from copying your ideas, because no matter how specific the idea, you still can't have conflict over it. And then if you just subjectively draw a line where you're like, about here looks good, that's necessarily going to be arbitrary, and therefore it's not derived from any principal difference between ideas on either side of the line. And in that way, there's just no, like, yeah, there's no principled line that you could draw on certain ideas which, you know, it's okay to seize people's property over.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I understand your point, but I wouldn't agree that what you described is a contradiction. I would say
it's a continuity problem is what it is.
I would say it's a direct and inevitable result of the complexities of reality. It's not just IP rights where we don't have an exact line. I would say it's most laws where we don't have an exact specific line. That's why we need judges. That's why these decisions can't be made and executed by machines. That's why we have decisions at all. We don't have a ready answer to every problem and every conflict already laid out. We need to evaluate every conflict by its own and formulate an answer and make a decision as to who is right and who isn't.
The problem is you can't even decide whether or not there is a conflict unless you have this sharp line.
I'm saying there is one. No, that's not true. As I said, that's the same, that's identical to every other law. I couldn't think of a single example right now where we don't have a blurry line separating
murder,
lawful from unlawful. Well, what do you do when you murder somebody? Just give it to me very blatant, as if you were describing it to a child. You kill them unjustly.
Yeah.
Okay. But how do you define unjustly?
Basically, unjust would be in an act of aggression.
Okay.
And aggression is defined. Aggression is defined as conflict initiation, and conflict being defined as the contradictory action of two individuals.
What if there's three individuals?
Or, multiple individuals, right? It does, yeah. What if I was just keeping it simple.
Yes. What if I initiate aggression towards a person who is threatening somebody else and I kill them? Have I killed them unjustified, unlawfully? Or haven't I? You still with me?
Yes.
Yes. Let's say somebody is threatening a man on the street, and I can immediately tell the situation is very dangerous and threatening. The person being threatened might be killed within moments if nobody reacts. So I decide to react. And as I strike down on the aggressor, I have initiated aggression with them, despite not being in a direct conflict with them, and unfortunately they didn't survive my mighty fist. I have killed them without them being in conflict with me.
I would say
I
if they hadn't
initiated
done
the aggression.
if they hadn't done anything, and they weren't in the process of doing anything, you have initiated conflict unjustly.
I would agree. But now the definition has already become hazy, isn't it?
No.
I'm gonna say they were in the process of doing something. What if it later turns out it was actually a movie production? I didn't see the cameras.
Well,
I
then
didn't
you would
notice
be
they were
in the
acting.
definite wrong. Because the principal
You think so?
the principal difference is that that person was cooperating as an actor with the other
Yes.
actor,
Yes.
and
Without my knowledge.
therefore was not aggressing. So that would be an
But
empirical
they-
issue, right? It would not be an issue in principle, it would be an issue in empirics.
We still need a solution for that one. We need a principled solution to this issue. Because in the end of the day, you want a clear line.
The point of the principled solution is that given certain empirics, the principle will apply, right?
But the same would be right
it may
for
be
IP
difficult.
laws.
It may be difficult to gather evidence of the empirics.
Yes.
But if
Yes.
you can sufficiently cross a bar of evidence, then
Yes.
the principle will apply. That is not
But
the
one of
case
the
with intellectual property, because you're just drawing an
absolutely is.
arbitrary line. There is no bar to meet.
Yes, the bar to meet is that you not infringe on another person's, let's say, possibility to make use of their intellectual property, and that if you use their intellectual property, you do so in a transformative way.
I don't believe you believe that, because there are ideas that you agree can be used that is not an infringement on people's intellectual property rights. The problem is that the line you draw between them is arbitrary.
What would these examples be?
Green pipes.
No, that's not a specific idea. That's a generalized societal concept. It's not owned by anyone.
These two categories of general idea and specific idea, what determines what falls into these categories? I'm asking for that because that's going to be your hard line.
Okay, I think I see what you're trying to get at, but I still believe this would be true for every other law as well.
I don't.
We can go back to another example. Let's say that the person lied to me. They told me they were gonna kill somebody, and then I needed to kill them to stop them. I wasn't mistaken. I didn't take a movie production for an actual murder. I took them by their word. They were lying to me due to motivations we can never understand because they are now dead.
Well, then you did something wrong.
Why? I tried to save somebody. They had a gun in their hand.
You killed someone who wasn't doing anything.
No, they had a gun in their hand and they are threatening somebody. There was a threat. That's still the same as with the previous example. Just failed to mention.
They had a gun in their hand and they were threatening somebody. Okay.
I'm basically saying, let me put it simpler. I formulated it way too difficult. Let's say they are actually threatening somebody with a gun, and all I can do to save that person is to use lethal force.
Okay.
And then through some magical mysteries, through some miracle, we all suddenly realize that the person was just kidding. Have I committed a crime or not?
You have.
But why?
Because the person did not have intent, and also didn't do the act of actually harming someone.
True, but how was I supposed to know? They told me they have the intent.
Well, that would be an empirical problem then.
Not really, because I did have some direct information from the person themselves, but it was fabricated, it was a lie. You could say that's an empirical problem, but not an empirical problem of missing information. It is
the idea. The idea is that they have the intent and the ability to carry out a crime, and that they, let's see, yeah, but if they fail, they still are guilty of attempting to do it.
That would be true as well, yeah. But to get back
so
to
in that
IP
case,
rights,
they failed because you stopped them.
in a case, that's true, yes, in a sense. Even though they apparently did still attempted to.
Okay.
They just didn't went through with it. But to go back to IP right, wouldn't we say that the issues specify where exactly the line is between transformative and non-transformative use of a protected right is also an empirical issue? Because we cannot gather enough information and process it to make that decision analytically.
The problem is, what is the principle upon which you will make that decision? Because what is the bar that they have to meet? So let's say you have a measuring device for how transformative something is.
Yes.
What is the line, in principle, that makes something too transformative, or like too similar versus not too similar?
Okay, I see what you're trying to say. Well, if we had such a device, we just, as a society, would need to agree on a number. We do that all the time, that we agree on where the line should be.
That's the problem, is because you're relying on some arbitrary line. You're not going to see a principal difference between both sides of that line. So it's like if you choose 50%, why not 51%? Why not 49%? Why not 25 or 75? Because it could just as easily be any of those other ways, and so it's necessarily like not a principal difference.
Yes, which doesn't make it unlawful or unjust. We have many arbitrary decisions made by reflecting upon reality and learning from our
what I'm saying is, those
flaws.
arbitrary decisions are necessarily not going to end up with just outcomes. %100% of the time, at least.
Okay, but let me ask you something. If you say we cannot apply my line because it's too blurry, why are you pushing for removing the protection instead of
because
just saying
that's where the principles point to. The principle of conflict avoidance points towards ideas not being able to be conflicted over. Thus, ideas are not property.
But that's still not practical. I understand the philosophical standpoint behind it.
It is
the
practical.
Philosophical viewpoint. No, it's not. We discussed
it is also
this last
correct.
time already.
It is also morally correct.
Yes, it is correct. But it's not applicable. It's not practical. A society wouldn't function like that.
It would.
You had no protection
it
of
certainly would,
property.
and it does already.
No.
It has for millennia. People have used ideas of other people since the beginning of time.
And we lived in absolutely shit conditions that we don't want anymore.
That's certainly a correlation, but it's not a causation.
It is the causation, yes, absolutely. You just need to look at the history of industrialization and how mass production of goods has benefited us all as a society.
I believe we would be a lot further along without intellectual property, actually.
No, because nobody would have ever bothered to make a company
here's the
mass-producing medicine if they don't have security in profiting off of that.
Here's the issue, is because on principle, monopolies
Yes.
are less efficient than competition, right? Competing firms is I'm trying to say both of those at the same time.
You can have both. There are several states of monopolization, and not all of them are wrong. That's a common misconception.
I believe that
society.
in every case,
Yes.
monopolization is less efficient than competing firms. And this goes for
I
law,
disagree.
this goes for police, this goes for schooling, this goes for healthcare,
No.
transportation.
No, I have to
roads.
disagree on most of this, simply because several of these could not be properly judged by people not educated in these spaces. If you,
I don't believe you need to be educated as a consumer to know what's a better option
you
for
do.
you than what's another different better option.
Absolutely do.
I don't believe so.
Absolutely do. Yeah, you just
all you need is
just introduce.
All you need is to be given choices.
You give another choice which police force you want to occupy your streets. And depending on how the demographic of your neighborhood is, you may get awfully racist police officers just beating the shit out of everybody who is not completely pale in the face.
And you know what that experience would teach you? It would teach you that you don't want racist police officers, and so you don't fund them.
Why would it teach you that? You get what you want. Get all the people beaten out of your neighborhood you don't like.
Well, you versus all of them in terms of funding. But here's the point.
What funding? They are poor.
Here's the point: is the racist police would be committing a crime by beating people. By the way.
Well, you say competition, so maybe there's also another government coming, and they have some awful ideas as well.
Here's the idea: is that there is an objective law that can't be denied, and that's derived principally, which is the correct way that things ought to be. And so,
but who gets decide what is the correct principle? People can disagree.
It's not about who decides. It's about the objective fact of the matter.
But you can't put these things into objective terms. That's not possible.
What isn't possible?
Process. We're talking about value systems now. Those aren't factual. They are not objective. They are subjective.
Here's the problem.
They are part of our cultural background.
Here's the idea: is that you cannot dispute the non-aggression principle without falling into a contradiction yourself, because in the act of arguing, you presuppose the key tenets of the non-aggression principle. That
would have to explain that to me. I don't understand why people would act upon this principle you just explained.
So, what I'm getting into here is what we call argumentation ethics.
Yes.
Essentially, what it means is, in the act of arguing. So let me break it down a little bit easier for you, so that you might understand. So you couldn't consistently argue that arguing is pointless, right?
Yes.
You would be caught in contradiction.
Yes.
So in the same way, when you argue, you are also, because you're presupposing that arguing is something you ought to do, at least sometimes.
Yeah.
There are some other presuppositions that come along with that. And that one is that you respect your interlocutor's self-ownership and their cognitive faculties. You treat them as an equal because you're trying to convince them through the force of argumentation rather than violence. And so argumentation comes with it. Well, if you're trying to get to the truth of the matter, you must do these things.
That's not That's not what motivates people. That's not how our
If they're not
evolved-
trying to get to the truth of the matter, if they're not being good faith, then they're not really arguing, are they?
Exactly. They would be beating you over the head.
Right, and those people, we can say that they're not being honest. They're just not arguing in a way that seeking the truth.
Honesty is a value, and that's subjective.
Right, you can disagree with what's correct and just be wrong. It's possible.
Now, wrong and right is also subjective. Those are all categories.
Again, we're talking about
are...
truth-seeking, right? We're talking about trying to honestly get to the truth. You must respect your interlocutor in their personal self-ownership and also their ability to form, informed thoughts, because you are also acknowledging the possibility that they may bring up information that contradicts what you're saying that proves you wrong. And you're willing to be proven wrong because you're seeking to find the truth of the matter.
That's not how the human psyche works, however.
That's what you're saying. That's what you're agreeing to when you begin to argue with someone.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
And so you couldn't.
But
yeah. No. I'm saying anyone who chooses argument and is trying to again legitimately argue, discovering the truth, they necessarily are saying yes to all of these.
Correct. But that will only hold true for a very small minority of people.
Well,
the majority of people are gonna say, I'm a simple man. I want what you have, I'm gonna take it from you.
Well, then we can treat them as animals then. We don't have to take them seriously.
The thing is, though, we kinda have to.
Not if they're not willing to step up to this table here. If they aggress against us, then they are not obliged to our consideration. So we'll just treat them accordingly.
It will do the same with you. In the end, the one with the bigger sticks wins.
Yes, but you'll be correct, and they'll be incorrect.
Yeah, but I prefer to live my life peacefully and not be correct.
I prefer to live my life peacefully as well, and so wouldn't it be better to engage in peaceful conflict resolution than violent conflict resolution?
Yes.
And so when you step up to this table, you're agreeing to peaceful conflict resolution when you start to try to argue with someone.
Yes. That's what's happening in our society as it is right now as well, but not everywhere, just in certain circles.
So we don't like that. Let's disregard the people who don't want to argue. Let's disregard those people for the sake of discussion.
Or can't. This is also an intellectual challenge. Not everybody can argue.
If you can communicate, you can't argue.
No.
You can.
No, I worked with a lot of people who were challenged in physical or mental ways. They are very well able to communicate, but they cannot argue on that level.
Well, it's not like... See, we're talking about just the act of arguing. We're not saying how good someone is at it. So,
but that's important, because
someone being able to present a proposition...
Yes.
Means that they can argue.
But they can't argue well. If these people needed to talk to you about a conflict and you are on the other side, you argue against them, you would win every single time.
Okay. That would mean I would be correct and they would be incorrect.
No. Arguing is not
at least as far as we know, unless someone comes up with a better counter argument that is just as solid and sound as mine, at least.
There you go. You don't even need a solid argument. You just need a argument. If they are incapable of disproving that due to any reason, you will consider yourself to be correct because you won the debate. It's still possible for you to be wrong.
True, it's possible for, our conception of gravity to be wrong too, but we have plenty of, rock-solid evidence for it.
Yeah, true, but we don't have evidence for the concepts you are laying out. That's a matter of opinion.
It's an evidence of a different sort, I would say, because what it is it's proven axiomatically by the proof by denial, which is that saying that in an attempt to disprove it, you're actually first needing to presuppose it, meaning that you couldn't in a million years disprove it, because the act of doing so would require you to assume that it's true.
I understand that point, but I don't understand how you make the leap to execute on that principle on a societal level. I don't see that.
Because it's axiomatically true, it is what is correct. Period. Like, nobody's opinion can change that.
Yeah.
Therefore, you know, following this ethical framework is correct, and going against it is incorrect. You know?
I'm not sure if you're right with that, because I kind of feel like I could use your principle to, let's say, base two very different and contradictory opinions on.
What are you saying?
I'm still thinking about how we would execute on that, like practically. Going back to IP law, for example, what exactly does this principle mean applied to IP law? You say it pushes towards liberty and everybody should be free.
The non-aggression principle. Do you know what the non-aggression principle is?
Yes. But now I'm saying you are being an aggressor towards people who are dependent on this system.
So what we're seeing is, because conflict between ideas is impossible, any defensive IP is necessarily aggressive towards other people's property. So you seizing my computer because I copied, you know, your original character is an aggression against me. It is illegitimate.
But you copying my character was an aggression towards me.
It was not.
It was.
Categorically, it was not. Because, again, conflict cannot happen over ideas.
How much work did you put into the execution of the character?
Irrelevant.
No, it's not irrelevant.
It is.
Because no idea is worth anything in your head. It needs to be
the amount of effort exerted is irrelevant. It's just an appeal to labor.
Labor is very important.
It is not.
You cannot. It is absolutely important.
We're talking about the principle
what kind of building are you living?
The principle of property has nothing to do with labor.
Principle. We live in a tangible world, and if we want a house over our head, we gotta use labor to put that.
If you voluntarily trade something that you value less than the house, and then the person who is selling the house voluntarily trades the house for something they value more than the house that you own, that didn't involve your labor.
That involved their labor, though.
Well, no, because it was after the fact.
But still, they needed to put in the labor.
Imagine that they actually didn't build the house. Someone else did.
Yes.
Therefore, there was no labor involved.
No, it was the labor of a third person. You're just pushing the responsibility of labor to another person. But somebody gotta build it in the end of the day.
Well, imagine nobody wanted the house. Then what?
Well, then you don't have to build it. But I'm just gonna assume people
what if you already did build
something in their life. Yeah, then maybe next day I want a car, and somebody got to build the car. Or I want to play a video game, and somebody got to build the video game.
What I'm essentially saying is labor is detached from value.
No, it's not. That's why all the corporations.
You can spend all the time in the world making an absolute piece of shit.
Yes.
So labor is detached from value.
Yeah, but value still cannot exist without labor. You are forgetting about efficiency.
Sure,
here.
actions are required in order to produce,
labor
consumer
isn't
goods
just-
from capital goods, right?
Labor isn't just time, it's also skills. There are several factors at play here when talking about labor.
But the skills aren't what determine the value of the product.
Oh, they very much are in many cases.
Okay, what if a really skilled person makes a complete piece of shit?
Then they haven't used their skills to their full advantage. They are skilled, but they didn't make that product in a skillful way.
Okay, so what if someone really skilled makes something that someone considers to be a masterpiece and another person considers to be a piece of shit?
That is what you call a target demographic.
How is it possible that it's valued differently by two different people, though?
Because people are different and have different value proposition.
I contend that it's because value is not in the labor used to produce something, but in the subjective evaluations of every person.
Yes, but in order to meet that person's standards, you're most likely gonna have to invest labor.
Sometimes you don't, though. Sometimes you can put almost no effort into something and someone will eat it up.
True.
So labor's not a necessary component.
It is a necessary component still, because what you are describing are, in fact, usually things which are non-essential.
What?
You cannot make food out of thin air.
If you make a crappy sandwich, but you can imagine someone would really love that crappy sandwich.
Yes. Yes, but you still needed to, plant the wheat and make bread and cut it and then make butter and put some cheese on it, milk some cows. That's a lot of labor.
But the person making the sandwich didn't commit that labor.
They also committed some labor, and they needed to pay other people to get these ingredients. And they paid for that labor.
They committed the labor of putting the bread down, then putting the meat down, then putting the cheese down, and then the other bread. That is not a lot of labor.
It's not much labor, but it is labor, even if it's not a lot of labor.
It still isn't.
Sandwich is not gonna assemble itself.
Like, the customer could have done that themselves.
True, and then they would have been willing to pay less, most likely. And still, the ingredients gotta get from somewhere.
Maybe someone would be willing to pay less for doing that, and that's because they don't value the labor more than they value the money they would have to fork out for it.
Exactly, which is fine to do. So what you do in this scenario, you go to the supermarket and buy the ingredients yourself and make yourself a sandwich. But other people maybe just want to buy a sandwich on the go.
Okay.
That's why people are different. I said I would like a house. What if I had a house already and I don't want to rent a house?
Doesn't automatically entitle, like, what they're buying isn't the labor. What they're buying is the completed sandwich. If the sandwich was made by a robot, they would pay the same price for it.
Exactly, but the robot and its construction also needs labor. Cannot.
If the sandwich was made by an abracadabra wizard who exerted no effort to conjure it out of thin air, they would pay the same price for it.
You are right. And that would completely crash our entire society as it is right now. And I'm not sure if that would be for the better. If we had abracadabra, here's your food.
See, it's what you're talking of is protectionism.
Yes.
And I think that this is an anti-productive mode of thinking because it prevents technological advancement in areas where people would be put out of jobs. It means that we're not, like, if protectionism actually won, we're actually halting progress.
Where the empirical evidence speaks against the introduction of IP laws and the progress of our industries, society as a whole, they correlatedly.
They correlated, but it's not a causal effect.
Can you prove that?
Yes, because monopolies, on principle, are not as efficient as competing firms.
Not true.
Because
Not
I can go through that. With monopolies, you have no reason to improve your product beyond what, you know, the people are, you know, basically the value of that thing in general. Let me try to give a good example. You're going to see less efficiency. So I guess giving a good example would be, instead of starting with monopoly, I would start with competition. So with competition, market share is not guaranteed. Therefore, you have a meritocratic system set up where you have to impress in more than the people around you in order to get more business. Thus, thus you're going to increase efficiency, you're going to advance the field, you're going to drive costs down as much as you can to offer better prices. All of these things are incentives within competition that don't exist when you have a monopoly granted by government. And so this goes true for every monopoly, even intellectual property grants.
That's already wrong. It doesn't hold true for every monopoly.
Can you give me a counterexample?
Yeah, let's say you make a car and you use a combustion engine. And you have that combustion engine protected. And it's a really great engine and people buy it. But now you start to stagnate. Nobody else can build a combustion engine like that because it's protected. You have the monopoly, right?
Right.
And then somebody makes a car with an electric engine, and it's better than yours. Not protected anymore.
So,
they can do that.
What you've just described is competition. You've not described the monopoly. So, if there were
there was a monopoly in my example.
Here's the problem. If there were no patent on that engine, we would have the best possible combustion engine that the market could produce within a few, like, you know, within enough time that the competition can assert itself.
Or we would get nothing at all because nobody can secure the funds in such an unstable market, as they cannot with guarantee say that their product will be protected and that they will be the ones selling their own development.
I'm gonna cast doubt on this idea that people just won't do things unless they can have a monopoly on them. I'm going to cast X to doubt.
You have to. You have to. Because
why
you need to make
okay, so
money
why
back.
does any business exist in any competitive field where there's no monopoly grants?
You want to?
Because you're saying that there's so much of an what you're claiming is that there's so much of an incentive not to start a company if you can't guarantee that you're going to have 100% market share. So something like McDonald's having, you know, not 100% market share on hamburgers doesn't mean that they're not going to do the business that the best way they can and try to get ahead of their competition, Burger King or White Castle or whatever.
Okay, first of all, you don't necessarily need 100% market share. You can have that monopoly on your combustion engine, but only
that is
100% of the people.
That is 100% market share.
No, because people don't buy a combustion engine; they buy a car.
You're making a mistake in category. You're making a mistake in category. So market share market share of the idea, not market share of the encompassing category that the product is in. So we're not talking about market share of cars. We're not talking about market share of automobiles in general. We're talking about market share of specifically the combustion engine.
That specific car you developed and are trying to sell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the thing that you
then-
got the patent on, essentially.
Then the solution is already right there. If that's just the one thing we're considering when looking at the market share, then people just need to make a better product than you. It doesn't need to be very similar to yours and use completely different technology, better technology.
What I'm saying is you have no right to stop people from copying that idea.
I disagree. You have every right to do that.
You do not, because there cannot be conflict over ideas.
Yeah, there is conflict.
There is not.
There's a conflict.
There is not.
Absolutely.
Competition is necessarily not conflict.
It actually is conflict. Two instances are fighting over the same market share.
No.
That's a conflict.
Market share is not property. Again, what market share is literally just the percentage of people who are willing to give you money. That is not your property. That is not something that you are owed. That is not something that you should be guaranteed.
Yes, conflict doesn't necessarily arise from something that you are owed. That's not all that conflict is. People can get into conflict with each other based on, let's say, wrong expectations alone. That happens every day, on every street corner.
Repeat that? Sorry.
Conflict does not always arise from just expectations. It can arise from emotional expectations as well.
That's
But
not
in this
conflict. Conflict is contradictory action on scarce means, because you can't use the same scarce means for two different purposes at the same time. That's the theory of conflict.
Doesn't that description fit the issue you described?
No.
Market share, the amount of money people are willing to spend.
Because market share is not property. It's not a thing. It's just people. It's literally just people agreeing.
But it is still a finite resource of money.
You are, again, what I'm saying is you are not owed. Sorry, you are not entitled to market share.
True, you are not entitled to market share, but you are free to try to gather some market share. People are free
not in a way that aggresses upon others. Again, we still have the non-aggression principle.
You do. I disagree with it.
Well, then you're wrong.
At least the way you. No, I'm not.
You're just incorrect if you disagree with it.
I'm absolutely right, because my system actually functions and outperforms every other system.
Your system functions on slavery.
Who's being enslaved?
The person whose property is being seized if they dare step out of line.
Property is being seized? That's not slavery. That's punishment. That's a sanction.
It is criminal.
And by the way, sanctions still exist in your system.
Maybe slavery was the wrong word, but it is certainly a criminal action that is being committed against that person.
No, it's not.
Because it is theft. Your society is running on the threat of theft, or the threat of jail.
Yes, it is, and that's fine.
Unjustifiable.
Your system isn't running on imprisonment.
No.
If I was living in your system and I just decide to kill my neighbor because I don't like them, what you gonna do with me?
Throw you into jail.
Oh, you're gonna throw me into jail?
No, what we're gonna do is actually take you to an arbiter and decide on the proper retribution, actually, is what we're gonna do.
A judge.
Yes.
That sounds awfully lot similar to our current system.
However, this judge will not be government appointed, it will be privately owned.
That's just worse.
It is better, because it's, free market competition.
Yeah, free market competition. If I'm a millionaire, I can just buy the judge.
You can't, though, because if you do, then the judge's reputation is now in the toilet for being bought off.
Oh, he's not gonna care. He's gonna be a millionaire after that. I'm very rich.
Or if he rules in a way that is contrary to natural law, people aren't going to want to give him their money to bring their cases towards him again. What judges will rely on is having a reputation for impartiality. That will be what the best judges will be built upon. It's the same thing we were having the conversation in Newgrounds. The best of the best rise to the top.
I won the lottery and I'm gonna buy the judge. He's gonna earn more in a single day than every other judge in their whole life.
All right, then he'll stop being a judge after that point, and he will have done a terrible thing. Exactly.
That's not just.
Well, then you just take him to a retrial, take him to a different judge. You appeal it.
You still have more money. Who's you gonna appeal to? Who has authority over that? That's bullshit. There's no government.
Maybe not appeal, but
there's not gonna be an appeal process.
No, there's.
If you lock the person away,
there's not an appeal process. There's not an appeal process.
But I think we're digressing. My issue is that I think taking someone's intellectual property one by one and replicating it without putting in any work that is significant, and I know that's a hazy line.
Your line needs to be hard and principled. Your line is necessarily arbitrary.
Okay, then here I'm gonna give you a principle. If the amount of work put into copying something would not be enough to create something comparable out of your own, your own creativity, your own ideas.
So this is the fallacy of labor.
Unjust.
Again, labor doesn't play into this. It's about.
Oh yeah, labor plays into it.
It's about property. It's about whether or not conflicts can happen over an idea, and they just can't, simply.
If you copy-paste the sprite sheet of Samus Aran from Zero Mission into your game, then you have not just taken the idea of a cool space bounty hunter.
You have done nothing wrong.
From the side, doing in circles.
You've done the same thing.
You have taken the results of labor of somebody drawing.
All right. So if you make an adaptation of Robin Hood, you are actually stealing the idea from the original author from 1562 or whatever. I don't know when Robin Hood was actually written.
Let me Google Robin Hood written 53.
But what I'm saying is you necessarily don't agree with that, because there are reuse of ideas that you do agree is good.
Oh yeah, I say these ideas are good, but we're not talking about good or bad. We're talking about just or unjust.
There's people who implement game mechanics in their game that are identical to the person who first invented them. And so how is that not a blatant infringement in the same way that copying sprite sheets is a blatant infringement?
Well, for one reason, usually you have to do the whole programming yourself. The results may be comparable.
Okay, so if I go into Paint and I have this reference sprite here, and I just kind of copy the colors at pixel by pixel, and I've basically recreated the sprite perfectly, but I did it on my own sprite sheet instead of just copy pasting it. Do I now have the right to use it?
No, because you still copy it just very, very inefficiently.
So then, if you copy game mechanics to the letter, then you must necessarily agree that that is also an infringement. And so, reusing any idea without changing it in some way would have to necessarily be an infringement.
No. First of all, you didn't copy-paste that idea. That's impossible in video games. You cannot just shout in an Excel file and tell it
What if you decompiled the code and then rewrote that code in your game, line by line. Maybe you changed a few lines, but it's essentially functionally the same code.
Yes.
Isn't that infringement?
Yes, it would be.
So that's what you're doing when you're translating a game mechanic over exactly.
Not necessarily. I can have one character jump and another character jump and have very different code behind that.
What if it's the same code, though?
If I took the code, and we're not talking about a single line that is standardized in this programming language, I'm talking about an actual functioning part of the code, and I just took that would be an infringement.
This is the part where I see the contradiction, which is there is no principled difference between something that you think is not fair game versus something that is.
I just told you the principle.
So the principle is what? That the computer did the copying instead of you?
Nah. The copying is the issue. Who did it is secondary.
Okay. So what about tracing? Is that bad?
Mostly.
Will you go to jail for tracing?
Tracing is a complicated issue.
Will you go to jail? Will you go to jail for drawing Mario in your own style?
No.
In your video game that you're selling to people?
I would say you shouldn't be able to call him Mario, but if you want to draw a fat plumber, that should be fine in my opinion.
So what about calling him Mario makes it bad?
Because Mario is a recognizable and iconic character in this very space.
What if the person playing the game doesn't recognize Mario?
That would be very unlikely, but I'm
what if it's something super? What if it's something super obscure like Vector Man that someone doesn't know was already a thing?
They can probably argue in front of court that they were not aware of that. That can be, considered.
Well, no, you say in court that you definitely knew Vector Man was a thing and you definitely copied it verbatim.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But the person playing the game has never heard of Vector Man.
Okay, but you still did something wrong. It's just that a majority of your player base didn't know.
So if you don't name it Vector Man and you just have a guy made of green balls, you're good. But if you do name it Vector Man, you're not good. Why?
Making a guy made from green balls may already be too much. I actually don't know how Vector Man looks, so I'm just guessing here. But if I was to, let's say, make a character whose hands and feet are not attached, a very Rayman-esque, but he otherwise doesn't look a lot like Rayman, he's not called like that.
Oh, we're talking Rayman now?
Fine.
I guess we'll move into Rayman. We'll move into Rayman because it's more, you know Rayman more than you do Vector Man. So if I have, yellow head, purple body, white gloves, purple shoes, that's fine. It's all fine right up until I say Rayman. Why is that?
No. You didn't listen to me. I said it may already be not fine if you are...
It may be? So how do you know?
It may be.
How can you tell?
I know by looking at it.
Okay, so how do you, what's the way that you measure it?
That's the thing. That's where you're wrong. Even in your system, you cannot measure anything. There is no measurement.
There's no need. Because you can just reuse ideas because it's okay because there's no conflict over them.
There is conflict. Not by your definition, but your definition.
What we're getting at is the fact that your line is subjective.
Yes, every system is subjective.
No.
We are subjective beings.
There's principles behind my positions.
Are those principles mathematical?
They're logical. They're logically they're logically indisputable.
Okay, then you know that logic is based on a couple of, let's say,
axioms,
which are not proven.
They couldn't be disproven though.
Yeah, that's not how
The law of
the
law of non-contradiction can't be disproven.
No, you can't disprove
Because you must
space.
assume that the law of non-contradiction is true in the act of trying to disprove it. Therefore, it must always be true.
But the axioms don't work like that.
That's how the axiom of law of non-contradiction works.
But even that is built upon logical axioms which are in themselves not proven.
No,
As
the
is
law of
all
non-contradiction,
mathematics.
axioms aren't built on anything. They're just true by nature.
Oh, true by nature.
Yes, because you fundamentally can't dispute them without contradicting yourself. And contradictions are falsehoods. Therefore, the negation of the contradiction must be true.
That what you just did already is an axiom which is not proven.
If you don't live according to this, you are in clown world. You can't actually function as a human being in any capacity.
True, but your system also wouldn't function.
What this has come down to is a rejection of all logic. And that is kind of a defeat on your part.
No, not really. I'm just telling you that you take it granted by nature. But you really should know, if you push the principle so much, that axioms are not proven. They are also, in a certain way, decided upon.
There's no way to advocate for the falseness of these axioms without contradicting yourself. So any avocation of them would be a contradiction, which means which means it would be false, which means that the axiom must be true by nature. At least by human nature.
Okay. Okay, at least by human nature. Alright.
Yeah.
I still don't understand why you believe that this principle right would necessarily translate to anything good in society.
It's what's right. It's what's moral. It's what will essentially...
Are the results not important?
Well, what we're talking about here is a principle of non-aggression.
Okay.
And so what we're talking about is absolute respect of consent.
And I'm saying you are being an aggressor if you take something one by one, basically, from me that I worked on. Sell it as your own.
The problem is I haven't taken anything from you because you have not been deprived of anything. You can still use that idea to your heart's content.
No, you're wrong.
No, I'm right. Because,
no, you're wrong.
Because ideas are not scarce.
I mean, probably executed ideas are scarce.
If you were to make a book with your story written in it, and I stole that book from you, yes, I would be guilty of a crime. But if I were to write down the contents of that book, without touching it, without in any way using it in a way that you are not approving of, then I would not be stealing from you. I would not be wronging you in any way.
You may not be stealing. I'm not sure if that term is really all that helpful in this discussion. But you would be wronging.
And this is why one of the logical conclusions of these principles is that you don't own the contents of your hard drive, but you do own the hard drive itself.
And that I disagree with completely.
So by virtue of owning the hard drive, you, in a way, proxy own the files on your computer, because nobody can deprive you of that hard drive without committing a crime, right? So you are still in control of what files are on the hard drive. It's just that if there was a copy of the hard drive made, and someone else has it, then you would not be in the right to try to control what they do with their hard drive.
That's the thing, though. That's a very simplistic approach. You completely overgo all that came together. Yeah, it's principled. But there's also principles behind all the hard work I did writing that book. And I believe it to be
Again,
valuable.
the labor is
for
irrelevant. Because
No, it's not.
It's irrelevant because you're not actually being stolen from.
Labor is already opportunity cost, and if I do that in order to retrieve something for myself, and you take it without the opportunity cost, that's a crime in my opinion.
I know you don't believe that to be true, because you still would agree that there are forms of labor and competition against that labor that is just.
Huh?
So you necessarily can't believe that that's true. What you just said.
I believe it to be true.
Well, then you're contradicting yourself.
In what way?
Because if I were to compete with, I don't know, let's say someone creates a new sushi restaurant in a town that has never heard of sushi before, they would have to invest a lot of labor in order to get the population of that town on board with eating raw fish.
Yes.
And if I, as a competing sushi restaurant, came in, I wouldn't have had to perform any of that labor in order to compete with you, although my competition with you is not an infringement on your rights.
Mm-hmm.
You agree with this, therefore it's a contradiction to say that it's the case with intellectual property.
Because this is actually not intellectual property. This is just an open market.
It's market share. It's market share. Ideas are also open markets, sir.
Yeah, but they're not the same product. Everything is on a market. But that still doesn't mean
if you make a new character, I can also use that character and compete with you.
I'm gonna say you shouldn't be able to do that.
The same way that a sushi restaurant can compete with another sushi restaurant.
Well, guess what? You also cannot waltz into the other kitchen and steal their recipes. That would also
exactly,
be illegal.
because you would be taking items out of their store that they are property owners of, and initiating conflict with them.
The recipe. You just
if the recipe was discovered and you started using it, there would still be no problem, because then the original restaurant could still be using that recipe.
You are framing it. It's not discovered. I'm saying you go in there to take it.
If you're breaking in, if you steal, again, the thing that you would be guilty of is stealing that piece of paper. It wouldn't be the recipe that you are guilty of stealing.
You have a great memory. You just read the recipe.
Okay.
Here's
the problem. Did you trespass?
Maybe not.
If you trespass, then you're guilty of that.
Okay, so you get a little fee for trespassing.
Yes.
But the corporate espionage is fine and you can keep running your business?
Yes.
That's unjust.
Yes, you can.
That's unjust.
It is not.
That's just a criminal
That is competition.
No, that's not competition. You stole the idea from someone.
Ideas are not property.
You did nothing to compete, but to trespass.
Again,
they are property by current law.
Sir, they are not, because they cannot be conflicted over.
They can be conflicted over in many ways.
No, sir, because conflict can only happen with scarce means. Because it's something that two people cannot simultaneously use. It's like, I have a stick and you want to go ahead and use that stick, but I'm already using it. We can't both be using it at the same time. That's conflict.
I have a customer who commissioned me to draw Samus Aran in a Boba Fett outfit.
Okay.
And you just take my picture and sell it to them for half their price, and they cancel their order. It's conflict. You're taking something from
Why did you release the image to the public without getting your payment first?
Oh, I didn't. You trespassed. You said that would be alright. You took it from me.
Well,
you copied it to an USB stick.
Trespassing is not alright. You're guilty of a crime there.
Of trespassing, but that's nothing. I'm still out of luck. I cannot sue you over
it is a crime.
Loss of mine.
They've done something wrong.
Yes, something wrong. They did several things wrong, though, not just trespass. And by the way, if I lose my USB
It's like,
stick
okay,
by
it's
accident and you
like,
find it, it's still not great for you to steal my piece of art and
let
sell
me,
it.
give me a
half the
second, give me a
price.
second here, give me a second. I'm gonna try to think of like an analogy here. Let me think here. Let's say... I'm having trouble coming up with an analogy.
Yeah, that happened.
It's like... They acquired that knowledge based on the crime they committed.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they did, what they did with that knowledge is now pretty much morally impermissible, I would say.
True, I agree with you, but I'm still out of a customer.
It's like, okay. Here's what it would be like. It would be like if you broke into Donald Trump's Trump Tower apartment where he lives.
Yes.
And you actually discovered that he had, like, let's say nobody knew he had a toupee.
Okay, yes.
You break
Wait, he has
in.
a toupee?
Yeah, you break in and you discover that he's taken off his toupee, and you're like, oh shit! So you have this information that's going to really hurt Trump's reputation, but you acquired it through trespassing.
Yes.
It's like that. That's basically the equivalent.
But that's also horrible.
Right. It's horrible because you trespassed.
And it's horrible because you invaded somebody's private space.
That's called trespassing.
Intimate information and spread it.
Again, the trespassing. Yes.
It's not trespassing anymore. I could also, trespass, find out he wears a toupee, never tell anyone. But by telling everyone, I'm committing a second offense.
Okay, so here's the thing. What you did was you ended up using their property to an end that they did not agree to, which is having the information available to you, which it was not permitted to be, right?
Yes.
I think you can nail them on trespassing and on misuse of your property. I think you can do that. But the issue is when you release something to the public, you are intending for people to see it. And so the idea is then freely available to people to possess at their leisure.
I still disagree.
And so then you've given consent for people to have this idea.
I disagree.
You do?
That was a very small example. I'm a commissioned artist and I have one customer. They want one image. One person steals it. Or, let's not say steal. One person takes it and sells it.
It's like you send something. You send something in the mail to someone. It's never. It's always going to be implied that you consent to someone opening and reading it, right? So if you post something online, it's always implied that you consent to people looking at it and doing what they will with it. They'll download it
and doing what? No, that's already different.
Well,
downloading,
here's the thing.
Fine, they need to download it anyway, otherwise they can't see it. But sharing it, selling it, using it, manufacturing it,
well, it's out of your hands at that point because it's in their possession. It's in their possession.
Possession doesn't just mean I took it. I can go over to you and just take your smartphone out of your
Well,
hand.
you
Now it's in
consented
my
for
possession.
you consented for it to be in their possession.
Can I hold your phone for a second? I need to call my mom, and then I never give it back. It's in my possession now. Now it's my phone.
Except now you're still not being deprived of the idea.
That's the thing, though. Not just an idea. It's opportunity cost and an investment as well. That's why
You don't own those.
I do.
You don't.
They
Because
are
all of those
the
are
fruits.
all those are is agreements that people might come to.
Yes, and agreements are very important. I don't
You
think why you
cannot
would
force
devalue
people
them.
into those agreements against their will. If they would
You
see,
can.
here's the thing: if there could be a competing firm that could provide
Yes.
a better service than you can, it's not just for you to force people into your firm on threat of punishment.
That's why patents don't last forever.
That's why they shouldn't be a thing.
No, they should be a thing, because otherwise you cannot finance any development project.
You can't put like a time limit on it and have that not just be an arbitrary subjective opinion.
Actually, you could just, gather data and see how long these products usually provide a certain financial benefit before.
So now we're going back to people are entitled to financial gain.
No, they are titled to the opportunity of financial.
They're not. That's the whole reason that it's not a bad thing for the second sushi restaurant to come in and compete with the first one.
Oh, the first one still has the opportunity. They were first. They can
Well,
keep
the same
their
thing.
market share.
Then if you think that, then you must also think that about the idea.
No, I don't think so.
Because the first person to execute on an idea necessarily has opportunity because they are the first.
Yes.
So then you must agree that it's the same principle as the sushi scenario.
No, because I don't see delivering sushi as an intellectual property. It's a service.
What's the difference? What's the principal difference between the sushi competition and intellectual property competition?
Well, for one, in the sushi case, labor is actually even more important. Because you don't think up at sushi restaurants once and then it just produces endless sushi. And bring somebody sushi on Monday. If they want more sushi on Tuesday, you gotta drive there again and deliver more sushi.
So what you're saying is labor is less relevant in intellectual property than it is in the sushi restaurant.
It is not irrelevant, but it is less relevant.
So then if it's less relevant in the sushi restaurant, if it's more relevant with the sushi restaurant and the sushi competition is fine, then it must be that much more fine to have intellectual property competition, right?
No, that's exactly the wrong way around. If you're able to work harder or willing to work harder, then in a labor-intense market, you would probably gain more benefits and more profit from that. But with ideas, the kind labor produces profit is very different. And as you've said yourself, it's kind of inconsistent. It's hard to strike, the big hit.
Well, it's the same. It's the same. For the same reason that someone will buy a cheap, crappy sandwich, someone will also really be into something that hasn't had much labor put into it. I don't think that labor is going to be different between these two fields, actually. What we're talking about it's not even the amount of labor, it's more so the quality of the end product.
Yes. That is the deciding factor.
So let's not talk about labor, let's talk about the quality of the end product instead.
But the thing is that in order to produce quality, you have to invest something.
Maybe you don't.
If you don't want to call it labor, maybe in most cases you absolutely do, and in many cases you have to.
It's not necessarily the case, though.
For the majority
It's
of
not.
works,
It's not a. It's not a requirement on like a principled hard stance level.
Okay, can you give me an example of an idea extremely successful and worth stealing that basically had no labor involved?
Flappy Bird.
Still involved some labor.
Among
It
Us.
had to be programmed. Also had to be
Fortnite.
programmed. There's a lot of artwork in Fortnite and a lot of work in just creating the assets.
Maybe accumulated over the years, but it was still pretty bare bones for the time.
It was bare bones, but it was there.
Which means there was relatively little. There was relatively little labor put into it.
Relatively little. So they labored efficiently, I would say, due to the value of their idea, possibly.
So therefore, more labor does not always equate to more quality.
Yeah, I never said that.
Okay.
I said several factors are at play. Maybe you can somewhat correct a, let's say, inefficient work ethic by putting more labor in it rather than putting better labor into it. But generally, I agree, more labor does not necessarily mean better results, better product, more financial benefit. That's true in every case, not just IP case.
So why are we factoring it in?
Because it's inevitable. It's impossible to get anywhere without labor. Even if you have very little labor,
so
you still need that very little labor.
My main contention is what I'm using. My theory of value is the subjective theory of value, not the labor theory of value.
Okay.
So the labor theory of value is saying that the price of a product should be like objectively equivalent to the amount of work it took to make it.
But nothing.
But what that
ever.
does, yeah, the problem with that is you're not factoring in time preferences. You're also not factoring in subjective wants of people.
Exactly. In the end of the day, you're still trying to sell to people, and they are subjective, emotional beings as well. In the end of the day,
what I'm saying is the subjective theory of value is that someone's subjective evaluation of something is all that matters, because it's only dependent upon whether they value what they're seeing or what they plan to see more than the money in their hand. Yes.
That I agree with, but I'm saying that in most, if not all cases, you cannot actually produce something that would convince somebody to give that money away without putting labor into it.
I agree. I do agree.
And it's not simple. You can spend years on building a mansion, and nobody's gonna pay for it if it just falls apart, no matter how much labor you put into it. And on the other hand, somebody is maybe so great, they just, sit down and craft something within 30 minutes that's astonishing beautiful and worth a lot of money to make.
I think what we're saying here is essentially something that's already made. But I think what you're imagining here is the instant transition scenario between a world full of IP to a world with no IP. You might see people making a full product and releasing it, expecting to get those post-release sales, but since piracy is no longer illegal, people will just get it for free.
Mm-hmm.
What you aren't... yes, in the short term, whenever people lose unearned privileges that they don't deserve, they're going to lose. There's going to be situations like this where people just lose out. But in the long term...
No, that's not what I'm saying.
In the
Firstly,
long term...
I'm completely willing to do some sacrifices in order to achieve a change for the better. I'm completely aware that
so then
sometimes...
I believe you would be on board with me. So in the long term, what you're going to see is people aren't going to just do labor expecting people to pay them after the fact. They're going to try to secure funding before they do it, the same way that, you know, someone who, like, is hired to paint your house is going to get an agreement with you for the money that they're going to get before they paint the house.
I'm gonna, you know, meet with you a little bit here. I'm gonna admit to something, and
Okay.
I'm gonna say that even though I don't agree with the solution, I'm gonna say it seems much more applicable for spaces where we deal with purely creative works.
It's
media and
what it is it's just putting the concept of ideas in their proper place ethically.
And I think that's much more applicable when we're talking about music, movies, books, video games, etc.
Plus inventions.
And that's where I'm going to disagree. Minus,
plus medical.
Larger researches. That's where I disagree. I can't see that function out. I can't see how you would fund possibly millions upon millions on developing something without anybody in the society being willing to guarantee you that you have any return on your financial
here's the problem. Here's the problem
investor.
with this example. I had done some more thinking about this.
Okay.
You're assuming that this end goal must be met regardless of if people want it.
No, I'm not. I'm completely acknowledging the idea of failure. That's why some corporations just go down. They invest in a project that was expensive and it didn't return a profit.
Okay, so if people don't want it, they're not going to put their money towards it. But if they do want it, in a free, unhampered market, which is one that we haven't really lived in yet, people will fund the things that they want, as opposed to having taxes deducted from them, which will put their money towards things they necessarily didn't want because it wasn't going towards that in the first place.
But that's where you're wrong, because people are gonna buy what's cheapest. And those people who didn't have to invest so much into development and research and just took already established ideas on the market and reproduced them can sell their stuff so much cheaper.
Okay.
They're always gonna win.
All right.
Everybody who puts so much money into development.
Feix. Maybe that is because the price of those goods should be lower. Maybe it's because our intellectual property has artificially inflated the price of a lot of goods, especially in the medical field or in the invention field, and the price should be going down to where, you know, it's more affordable.
You're partially correct, but I'm not saying your solution is gonna lower the prices by a bit. I'm gonna say it's completely plummet the prices.
It'll plummet it down to the price of the materials plus whatever profits they want to make.
Yes, but that's not all the cost that goes into the development of such a project. You're not seeing the whole picture.
That's how it works with lighter manufacturers. That's how it works with, you know, pencil manufacturers. That's how it works.
No, actually, that's completely wrong. There's such a storied history about how the first ball pens actually came into being, and there was so much research and re-evaluation and work done before finally we had
pencils are like 99 cents now. They're like the price of materials plus a little bit.
Exactly, because that achievement is very long ago, and the strategy was to make them cheaper.
So there's no reason to keep medicine that high then.
To be honest, I would need to actually see the actual numbers, to give a specific answer.
I'm just saying,
if I
in
just
principle.
give an answer on principle, yes, if I say an answer on principle, I would say that medicine, just looking at it morally, should be affordable anyway, so it's always, at hand if needed. Now, of course, it's completely possible for a new type of medicine to be very expensive in its development. Like those giant CT machines you put your head in to get scanned, those cost just
Sure, like
billions to
that's a
produce.
big expensive machine that takes a lot of manufacturing, right?
That's why I would actually propose to have
there's a lot of capital goods going into that.
Yes. That can be true for just a small tablet as well. You don't know what kind of chemicals
here's the thing
there.
though. Without patents, all the artificial costs will be gone, and it will basically be lowered to the price that the minimum price that the market can allow, while still, giving the manufacturer enough profits to stay alive and see that the business venture is worth pursuing.
True, but that's under the assumption those inventions get made in the first place. If everybody knows, they are not going to get compensated for all their investment.
They're going to get they're going to have first move advantage, which is plenty for them, which means that they will be able to corner the market on day one.
No.
And reap many more rewards than other people will in the long term, because they are the first established brand of that type of thing. This is what happened. This is what happened with Oculus Rift.
I'm pretty sure you underestimate how quickly such devices are being used and you underestimate how long it takes for these to actually enter the market. You don't just ring on the doorbell of a hospital one day and tell a completely clueless doctor you have a new machine they never heard of, they should buy it for $2 million. First,
all right, but you've already got a massive head start, though.
But I'm saying that head start is not going to be enough.
I think it is. I think it's all you deserve.
Well, maybe it's all you deserve, but you're not gonna meet your investment with that, so you're not gonna be able to research anymore. So maybe that's ethically just.
I'm really just doubting this idea that if you can't get a monopoly on something, then you're just not even gonna try. I don't think that's how the market works, man.
I mean, it's not about trying. You don't invent such things alone because you felt like it in an afternoon. You pay people over years of hard work and labor.
Okay.
And you need that money back. You have no choice. You can maybe stomach a failure or two, but that's just because in the
so then maybe what you see is there are going to this is what I was saying in the previous podcast. This is why you might see a division of labor further between the people who come up with the blueprints or the ideas or the designs, and then the people who actually use those in the actual, practical way.
But how would that even work? You said that ideas are completely free for anybody to take. So now you are proposing to open a company.
So how else do you get paid?
Produces something that
I've already you noticed that I've already given you a possible monetization plan for people who come up with ideas.
Just because there's a niche of people on the internet kickstarting the latest Hollow Knight doesn't mean that society at large is gonna be interested, and any
You'd be
investment,
surprised how much money these Kickstarters can make sometimes. And this
Sometimes.
is with IP still in effect. Without IP still in effect, people's time preferences are going to lower dramatically, and you're going to see a lot more just baseline awareness of these types of things, because it's the only way that the market will move forward.
Doesn't mean people will engage. It could just crash.
People will have a vested interest in engaging, because without doing so, they won't get their things that they want.
Yeah, they will notice that when it's too late.
Too late for what?
Well, too late. They're gonna notice it when
is everyone gonna die?
With medical, yeah, many people are gonna die.
Is everyone gonna die?
So you want people to die?
No.
So we can steal Mario's sprite.
No, I don't think it would get to that point.
Okay, no, we need to play the clip. We need to play the Iron Man clip. No.
That's funny.
Okay. Still, I want to take a couple steps back and say I'm partially agreeing with you. In the purely creative market, I think your solution is actually very interesting. Your solution is very interesting when we look at markets that concern themselves creativity, with vision, with arts, craft.
Okay,
I think it's much more applicable and reasonable there. I mean, this kind of solution in parts
I still think it would be fine to do it with medical.
I don't see that happening. I mean, I don't see that functioning. That's the issue I'm having.
If it functions with, games and movies, it will function with medical.
Nah, not necessarily, because there the research could be so much more expensive than...
Why would it be more expensive?
Because you need academics and mass, and you need highly advanced technological devices.
Why? Okay, so I can see why
I'm gonna say it. Notch couldn't make a CT scanner on his laptop. He can make Minecraft, and he made that.
All right.
He did a damn fantastic job.
Maybe without intellectual property, you would see an increase of efficiency in those areas too, to the point where it wouldn't cost so much.
Not sure if that's possible, because there's just some fields that are so complicated that you need a lot of training.
It's
maybe not official training by university.
I actually do.
Maybe you're a self-made man.
I do have a counterexample.
Okay.
Einstein. He came up with the theory of relativity, which was not patented. He didn't make a dime off of it, as far as I remember.
Yeah, but he was still a theoretical physicist.
So what I'm saying is basically that took so much labor and effort. I'm sure he made money based on, his status, and, the discovery was just so good that people are like, dude, you're just going to be awarded a prize for this, right? So people in the medical field can do similarly to that, where, it's a very labor-intensive process, and, your method of monetization can't be direct, but it can be indirect. And I think Einstein is a good example of that working.
Well, but he also was working as a professor, so he made his that way.
I don't see why that couldn't also happen the same way as well.
But maybe, yeah. Yes. But yeah, I know what you're trying to say, but personally I don't see that functioning as well. Like, sometimes you just gotta be like, oh, I got an invention here, but I don't know which exact material is reactive enough to make that work. So I just import masses upon masses of very expensive material and test it in my lab.
Well,
it's gonna be hard to finance if all you're working on is an idea that as soon as you show it to anybody, is no longer yours to make money off.
I don't think that is a unique thing to what you're like to this zero IP world. You've got that happening also in IP land as well. Someone just has an idea and doesn't have the materials to execute on it, and then, you know, someone else comes along and patents it.
Well, usually what happens or could happen is that the person having the idea, on the basis of the strength of his idea, gets an investment, and then he can do it. And he gets the investment because some rich guy knows he'll sell this idea later for lots of money. And do that if the idea is just out open in the wild for anybody to profit off.
I think the idea is, again, you're not entitled to market share. You know, if it's not worth it to you to make your idea, then you shouldn't do it.
That's very simplistic. It's possible the idea is very much worth it for me, and that there is a market share.
Well,
that
no, because if it would put you into bankruptcy to even try to achieve the idea.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can't find a way. And you can't find a way to monetize it outside of you know, releasing it to the public. Then you are, you know, like, here's the thing too. If you release like a prototype, nobody's gonna like have the exact recipe for it, right?
Depends on the machine, but yeah, in many cases reverse engineering may be very difficult or impossible to do.
So yeah, I mean, you do have options still.
But isn't that entirely unfair of you? So only those people get to benefit from that system which have ideas so complex to reverse engineer that they can just trust in nobody else figuring it out in the next 10 to 20 years?
It's if you
not
have a unjust.
Genius, I disagree. I think it's unjust.
It's not, because it's consistent with these principles.
Yeah, but maybe you might think
you might think it's mean of someone to compete with someone. You might think that's a sleazy thing to do, but it certainly isn't.
That's not competition. What you're describing. That's not competition. What you're describing.
What?
I do not compete by taking somebody else's work and selling it without their consent.
If it's an idea,
that's not competition.
If it's an idea, yeah.
Nope. I still disagree. It's not just an idea anyway. We talked about this already. If I copy-paste a sprite sheet over, there's already skills and artistry and labor and software all included into the creation of that sprite sheet.
If you haven't made the idea a reality, you really don't have something to sell to people.
Well, the idea.
The idea.
I can patent that currently.
The idea itself is, again, not your property.
That's your opinion. I disagree.
Well, then you're just contradicting yourself.
No, I don't.
Because you agreed previously that ideas are not property, because if they were, then you couldn't make, you know, different things in the same genre. You couldn't, you know, recreate game mechanics.
Well, maybe we just have different ideas about what an idea is. Maybe a jump button is not an idea to me. Maybe that's just a given. Maybe that's not an axiom for me.
Again, idea. What is an idea? It is a non-scarce. I guess it's really anything non-scarce. I would. Yeah, I think so. I think that's true. I think ideas are anything non-scarce. I can't think of it.
Sun rays?
I can't think of it.
They're technically also scarce, right?
They are scarce, yeah.
They are scarce.
But it would be really difficult. It would be really difficult to like take a
Run
sun ray out of the
this.
sky and try to like fight over someone with it. It would be
I
really
guess
difficult.
if you have like Blade Runner sized fields of photovoltaic, then you would run out of sun.
Yeah. I think ideas are that which is non-scarce.
Okay, let's come to an end. We are still clearly not in agreement with each other, but I just
think you're in deep contradiction with yourself.
And I disagree with you, and there's nothing you can do about that to change my mind.
It's okay to be wrong.
Yeah, you tell that in the mirror to yourself every day,
as long as you're willing to eventually come
gentlemen,
around.
Tim's morning routine, everybody.
As long as you don't act on your wrongness.
I mean, if I act on my wrongness, the worst thing I'm gonna do is be a completely original and creative artist. I can live
as long
with
as
that.
you don't try to deprive other people of using their own property. That's how you would be acting on your wrongness in a very negative way.
Yeah, so anyway, check out that game I'm developing called Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. It's
Oh yeah,
about
check
a
out
bounty hunter.
Feix's new game, My Change Word Sweetheart.
Yes, that I came up with.
Exactly. You did have a good amount of the ideas that I'm using in it.
You know when the credits roll and it says Tim?
A game by
That's
Feix.
a typo. That's a typo by me. It's still my game.
Yeah, that's
Not
hilarious.
like I couldn't figure out how to change the credits because
Dude,
I know
I'm
shit
almost
all about
Here's the thing, I'm almost at a position where I don't even think that you need to credit people. I'm almost at that point.
You know what? Let's stop here. Next episode, okay?
On the next episode, yeah.
On the next episode of Always Right. No, just kidding, everybody.
Okay, see you guys later.
Yeah.
Bye.